I'm going to call the December 2023 Williamsburg Planning Commission meeting to order. Heather, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Hamilton?
Here.
Mr. Kale?
Here.
Mr. Tarley?
Here.
Mr. Boswell?
Here.
Mr. Granger?
Here.
Ms. Liebel? Mr. Phillips?
Here.
Okay, thank you. We have one commissioner, Ms. Liebel, who will be appearing electronically today, and we need a motion to approve that electronic participation. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Kale?
Aye.
Mr. Tarley?
Aye.
Mr. Boswell?
Aye.
Mr. Granger?
Aye.
Mr. Phillips?
Aye.
Thank you. Ms. Liebel, are you able to hear us?
Yes, I can. I'm here.
Okay, thank you. We're glad you're here today. We move on to a matter of special privilege. We have a new planning commissioner, Mr. Bud Phillips, and we welcome you to the commission. I understand you will be participating but not voting today. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Having been sworn in within the last 30 or 40 minutes or so. Okay. Well, welcome. We're glad you're here. Our next agenda item is the approval of the minutes from our November 15 meeting. Are there any edits to the minutes that have been posted online? Hearing no edits, I'll ask for a motion to approve the November 15, 2023 minutes as submitted.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Kale?
Aye.
Mr. Tarley?
Aye.
Mr. Boswell?
Aye.
Mr. Granger?
Aye.
Ms. Liebel?
Aye.
Thank you. That brings us to the open forum, which is an opportunity for anyone in the room to address the commission on matters that are not already on the agenda. We will have a forum opportunity to speak about matters that are on the agenda later. If anybody would like to speak, now is that time. I'm not seeing anyone moving toward the podium, so I'm going to close that open forum. We don't have any consent agenda items today, but we have several public hearings. Just for everyone's understanding, ABCD PCR 2023-03, 3A, 04, and 05. We will have one presentation and one opportunity to speak on all of those because they're the same parcels, but then we will be voting on each of those individually, and then we'll move on to the WATA. Mr. Lambert, is that my understanding? Is that's how we're going to do that?
Yes, Mr. Chair, that's fine.
Great, thank you. Okay, Ms. Griffin, I believe the floor is yours.
Good afternoon. I'm going to put all of this together, and so we'll be actually looking at all 4 applications in one presentation. Let me see.
Would you mind moving that microphone up just
Yes,
at least a
I
little
will.
bit? Thank you.
Okay, I don't see the presentation, so I'm going to ask our IT team to fix that. In the meantime, I can tell you what's going on. The city has received a request to construct 199 luxury apartments across 2 buildings.
Definitely want this presentation because there's a great background this time. So I've seen the background already. It's a great PowerPoint background.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you. So the city has received a request from Crescent Communities to construct 199 luxury apartments with indoor and outdoor amenities and approximately 3,800 square feet of commercial space at 1430 High Street, Unit 6 and Unit 12. And it may be deceiving, the unit does not denote that there are units there. That is just how it was subdivided, and so the units actually represent a parcel. And so again, all 4 of these applications, I will provide an overview with all 4 in one fell swoop. So PCR 23003 is a zoning text amendment. In order to have the apartments that they're requesting, they would need to request first a zoning text amendment. The property is currently zoned ED2. This is our Economic Development -2 district. And at this point, the ED2 district here, it's the High Street master plan. And this master plan allows for 40% of the gross net developable area can be residential. They have reached that max at this point, and so they're requesting an ED3 zone in order to be able to build on the last 2 parcels that are at the High Street location. The next thing that they're asking for is the rezoning. In order for the text amendment has to go first, and then the rezoning comes next. And 23004 is the special use permit. The special use permit is to actually construct the luxury apartments on the properties. And then the last request is 23005, a special use permit to be allowed to have shared parking and a reduction of the parking requirements in accordance with section 21709 of the zoning ordinance. And I'm going to go through all 4 of these individually. First, just to give some background, this was originally called the Roselawn property. Here you'll see that back in 2005, between 2005 and 2006, it was first zoned ED. The ED allowed for 10 dwelling units per acre. The entire parcel is 55 acres. And when I say parcel, I should say development is 55 acres. The net developable area is 48 acres. So at the time, back in 2005, it was allowed 10 dwelling units per acre. At the time, the developer came back to the city, and the city agreed that it should be moved to 12 units per acre, and that's how you get the ED2 district. And this is currently what this looks like now. This is High Street. Again, the parcels that are in question are this parcel here and the vacant parcel here. Here is Plaza Azteca, and here is La Yaca, and here is the movie theater. Just to give you some specifics, as I said, at 48% is the net developable acres, at 12 units per acre. So the entire community was allowed 580 residential units. They've reached this max with the Sterling Manor apartments, with townhomes at Treyburn and High Street View. And because they want to build additional residential, this developer wants to build additional residential, they have to actually request a zoning text amendment to do that, to change and have a new zoning district, ED3, which would allow for this. So zoning text amendment will allow 2 things: 1, flexibility, and then 2, density. This allows a variation from the requirement that no more than 40% of the gross area of contiguous land be devoted to residential use. Currently, this is what the ED2 district requires. Also, the ED3 would allow a density of not more than 105 units per acre. Right now, the ED2 district allows 12 units per acre. I wish I could ask if there's questions because everything builds on each other, but I'm going to assume that this is being understood as I'm going along.
Well, we can stop and just say, does anybody have questions so
Okay.
far? That's a lot of data. Ms. Liebel, any questions so far?
No, none from me.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you. I think you haven't lost us yet.
Thank you. Okay, so now we have the rezoning. If pretty much the zoning text amendment is adding a ED2, ED3 zone, if that is approved, or at least recommended approval, then the rezoning would come, actually rezoning the 2 parcels to the ED3. With that rezone, the developer is offering 2 voluntary proffers. One, they would build in conformance to the plan that you see before you today. And then 2, they are going to proffer $7,775 per dwelling unit towards affordable housing. Right now, the city does not have an inclusionary zoning ordinance where we require developers to provide us with affordable housing on site. They did not want to provide affordable housing on site. Instead, they wanted to do these proffer conditions, and this equates to around $1.5 million that would be put into an affordable housing fund. Any questions about that?
Is there an affordable housing fund?
There is an affordable housing line item. There is not a plan for that money at this time. So, the third request, a request for a special use permit to construct 199 luxury apartments on property. And this is Unit 6, and there's Unit 12. Unit 12 is directly across or adjacent to the Movie Tavern. And this gives you the information for Unit 6 and Unit 12. And let's start with Unit 6. Unit 6 is 1.26 acres. It's a residential only. It would be 115 dwelling units. You would have an interior amenity of around 10,633 square feet. That's on the first and second floor. And then you would also have a pool on the outside of that. Unit 12 is 0.70 acres with 385 square feet of commercial that would be closest to the Movie Tavern, and it would be on the first and second floors. And then you have 2,233 in square footage of indoor amenities. Altogether, 1.26 and 0.70 gives you 1.96 acres, and at 105 units per acre, you then get 206 dwelling units. So, altogether, they could have 206 dwelling units. They're asking for 199 dwelling units. Any questions about that?
That's in the not yet existing ED3.
In the not yet existing ED3, correct. If this was ED2, there would be no residential here because ED2 is maxed, okay? This just gives you a view of Unit 12. This is the building that is closest to the Movie Tavern. The rendering here shows the commercial space, around 3,200 square feet of commercial space, again, first and second floor here. And then you have the rendering at the bottom that shows looking from the plaza between La Yaca and Plaza Azteca. This is Unit 6. Sorry. Unit 6 does not have a commercial element, but this is where you would have the 115 units of, 15 units of residential. And the last request is for parking. A master plan was submitted for the original development proposal. And a master plan is allowed to be provided in accordance with Section 21709. So this is a request really just to follow along with what the ED2 allows, that allows them to provide you with the master plan. This request is also asking you to agree to a shared parking arrangement and a reduction in the number of spaces that are actually required for the residential 199 spaces plus the 3,800 square feet of commercial. So going from the top, the total amount of parking spaces is 874. In my report, you will see that I made a mistake and gave you the wrong numbers. I gave you 1-bedroom units would be 60, and then I said the 60 2-bedrooms would be 139. It's actually 30, 60. The 2-bedrooms are 30%, giving you 60 2-bedroom spaces. The 1.50 represents the number of parking spaces required for each 2-bedroom apartment. 139 1-bedroom units would be requested at 1.25 spaces of parking. And then you have visitors parking for each, 199 times the 0.25. The total required spaces is 343 spaces. The spaces needed for the current uses is 657, and then you have 874. That's the total amount of spaces provided, minus the 657 gives you 217 spaces left over. They are going to provide 86 spaces on the Unit 6 and on Unit 12, and I'll show you a picture of that to come in a few minutes. But if you have 217 spaces plus the 86 surface parking that they're going to provide on the property, you get a total of 303 spaces. Okay. You then have 343, the required spaces for what they want to do, minus the 303. There's a deficit of 40 spaces. Now, in my staff report, I also made mention of 110 spaces that was mentioned in the AES report that showed, from what I could read, this was 110 spaces of vacancies. So there's 13% vacancy right now in High Street development in that master plan area, and those vacancies equate to 110 parking spaces. It wasn't clear in the write-up if those 110 spaces were included in the 657. I've been told today that they do. And so in my report, I said that there was actually more spaces at a deficit than they were. There are actually 40 spaces deficit. And I believe in my report I said 150. And I will, it should be on the write-up.
Tavia,
Yes. Yeah.
for all the existing structures on the property, even though they're not fully occupied at the moment, if they were fully occupied, how many spaces are required by code?
I would, allowed, that would be a hard number to give you because it'll be based on the square footage of the business and the type of business that's there.
Okay,
But I know how many spaces were provided. And the master plan assumed that this would be the peak. The 867 would be the peak required. 874, excuse me,
right.
be the peak. And so in my report, I said that I felt like there were actually 150 spaces that was a deficit. I got a call today to confirm from the client that the 110 spaces for the vacancies are actually calculated in the 657. Does that make sense? I'm seeing nods, but I'm seeing frowns.
Okay, here's
Okay.
a frown.
Yes.
You wrote the 86 spaces plus the 217 unutilized spaces totals 303 parking spaces, leaving a shortage of 40 parking spaces below ordinance requirements.
I didn't hear the last part. Say it again.
Below ordinance requirements. 40 parking spaces below ordinance.
Yes, that simply means they should have 40 more spaces that they're giving you
That's
to be
still an
able.
accurate number, though.
That's an accurate number. The 40 deficit is an accurate number. What I was saying is there was mention of the fact that the entire development has a vacancy of 13%. And with that 13%, there were 110 parking spaces that, if filled, would be used. It was not my understanding, based on the write-up, that the 657 that they gave as used included the 110. So I added the 110 plus 40, because what happens at what time when those vacancies are actually occupied, right? So I had a deficit of 150. I've learned today the 657 actually does include the 110. Does that make sense?
It's basically counted as they're occupied.
They're counted as they're occupied within this 657.
Gotcha.
Yes, okay. So this just shows you the 86 parking spaces provided around Unit 6 and Unit 12. There was also a question about trip generation, and simply what was done here was there was a study that was done on the square footage of office and retail that was supposed to be envisioned for Unit 6 and Unit 12, And that trip generation from those businesses were then reviewed against the trip generation from the residential. And what it found is that residential units will result in a 61% less traffic in the AM peak hour and 73% less traffic in the PM peak hour and 77% less traffic on a daily basis. So overall, the traffic generation from the residential uses is less than the traffic generation from the business uses that were supposed to be or are planned for those particular parcels. So just to go through the staff analysis, comprehensive plan is what we look at first when anyone comes in and wants to do a rezoning. So we do see that this is compatible with the plan because a plan allows for less residential than other uses in the ED and ED2 district. What that simply means is in the comprehensive plan, for the ED2 and ED2 district, it says that if you have this particular zone, you want to make sure that your residential uses are less than, are the minority, are less than half. So they are requesting an increase, and that increase would bring the property to 43.3% of residential. Okay? So in that way, this is compatible to the comprehensive plan. However, and I think more importantly, there are specific references to the ED2 district and specific references to High Street and the Quarter Path ED2 district. And it specifically says that these two should remain as ED2 and the master plan should remain in place. That's significant from a staff perspective because there are other areas in the comprehensive plan where it veers off from what it is now. So, for example, there are instances where it says this is now commercial. And there is an opportunity, if someone comes in with a special use permit, and if it's favorable, to make it all residential. And that's mentioned in the plan in several instances. It's not mentioned here, which makes me lean to the conclusion that it was not meant to be, that this was meant to be maintained as is, as commercial and as residential. And one thing that I didn't mention, Middle Street actually divides this property, the 48 acres to 55 acres. And you'll see behind Middle Street, you have all residential, and then closer to Richmond, you have all commercial. And there is no intermingling of the commercial and the residential. Density, the highest density right now allowed in the comprehensive plan is 14 units per acre. The thought of staff is that increasing it to 105 units per acre should be something that is reviewed comprehensively by the city and not taken bit by bit with different proposals that come in. But that is a significant increase in density for this area. And once this is set in place, ED3 then becomes something that others could also apply for. Compatibility. There's questions about the separation of residential from commercial set by Middle Street, which I just mentioned, and then the function of the development with the addition of residences in relation to outdoor amenities. Now, we know that a master plan community and a mixed-use community by its tenant is supposed to have a mix of uses. Because this particular development has not been set up that way, there is question about how the amenities would be used. For example, the building that does not have the pool, would people in the building without the pool then walk over to the other side amongst the businesses to get to the pool area? Just different things like that. How would that work? And then parking. I've said before there's a deficit in parking spaces versus the parking spaces that are actually required. And then parking spaces calculated include spaces, and I mentioned that, and we learned that today. The other thing about the spaces is the idea of shared parking. Shared parking works in theory, but we know now that we have had people ask about parking spaces for restaurants, parking spaces for businesses, and having to try to find parking spaces, and how does that change when you have residences there at all times versus now where there are people coming and going because it is a business establishment. And then I just wanted to mention that they are providing housing affordability, not on the property, but they are providing that particular amount toward affordable housing goals in the city. Staff does recommend denial of PCR 23003, 23003A, 04, and 05. The proposal is not in harmony with the comprehensive plan for the reasons I've set forth, the inadequacy of the number of parking spaces, and then the density, as I've said before, of 105 units per acre is substantial and would alter the landscape of the city and should be discussed in a broader, more comprehensive process. You've asked questions along the way, but I'm happy to answer any further questions that you have.
Thank you, Ms. Griffin. Let me give Ms. Liebel first crack at that, since she's liable to be forgotten otherwise.
Okay. I just want to reiterate, you were talking about the 105 units per acre being the highest density we have anywhere in the city. How does that compare with the density in Midtown Row? Or is it different because Midtown Row has so much acreage under a single entity's umbrella? That's
correct. It's different because Midtown Row is calculating it from the larger density, just like what it was done when this was first developed, from 48 acres, and now you're just dealing with 1.9 acres.
Okay, I understand that. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Other questions for Ms. Griffin?
Okay.
I'm trying to think of how to state this question. So
We'll give you a moment.
if you have a large single property, as High Street started out, got an integrated look at the facilities and the residences and the parking. Now we've moved away from that and we've got a couple of small chunks of land, and then we've got all the rest of High Street surrounding it. I'm a little curious about what the rights are related to who gets to use what parking spaces when you've got different owners involved.
So
Might be a question better for the presentation than for
Okay.
you.
That's totally fine with me.
Okay, we'll leave that as an open question and hope that somebody answers it. Okay, other questions for Ms. Griffin? Okay, thank you, Ms. Griffin. Very nice, as always. I'm going to open the public forum, and as we always do, we'll give the applicant first opportunity to speak. I believe, Mr. Davis, you represent the applicant. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, members of the commission. I'll ask the IT folks to spin over to the Crescent Properties presentation. Thank you very much. Pleasure to be before you this afternoon. Again, I'm Greg Davis with the Williamsburg office of Kaufman and Knowles. Pleasure to represent Crescent Communities. With me today is Brandon Wright with Crescent. His novel brand of apartments that Crescent develops have 69 locations nationwide, and Brandon has personal experience here locally, Greater Williamsburg, Virginia Beach, and Richmond. Project engineering firm is AES, and Mr. Ryan Stevenson is here. He's the author of the parking study. So questions on parking, we have the man. Traffic engineer, which prepared the report, which Ms. Griffin so aptly quoted, is Dexter Williams, and my colleague Benny Zhang and I are legal counsel for the project. You've seen the site, I think, very well described in the staff's presentation. What you do need to remember, though, is that these parcels are vacant after 13 years or more of High Street. And our fiscal impact consultant and Crescent and the Lamar ownership of the property explain that shopping styles have evolved in that time, driven to some degree by the pandemic, largely by the internet. Foot traffic is down in shopping centers, and the demand for bricks and mortar retail and other commercial establishments is down. And that has challenged bricks and mortar retail, and it has challenged High Street, and it needs some help. This proposal puts 200 high-end apartments with shoppers, diners, and foot traffic into High Street. It adds vibrancy, it adds traffic to the corridor. Movie Tavern supports the project. And these apartments increase the residential acreage in High Street by only 3.3%. The staff report suggests that this change from 40 to 43% may be inconsistent with the economic development land use category of our 2021 comprehensive plan, but I would respectfully suggest that that comprehensive plan is a guide and that this commission is the ultimate arbiter of what is and is not consistent with that land use designation, but certainly residential will remain by far the minority use in High Street with this proposed change. The alternative is to keep doing the same thing and hope for a different result. Hope that bricks and mortar retail demand changes and that some development occurs on this land. That would not boost the center, certainly not as quickly as this project, and would not give the Movie Tavern and the other established businesses there the help they need. So the proposed ED3 district would be overlaid on the northerly and southerly green parcels here, leaving the ED2 in place for the rest of High Street. And this shows the layout that my client proposes for the project. You'll note that this retail component is included in the apartment building, and that was with the guidance of staff to maintain the mixed-use character of High Street. That's a 5,000 square foot retail component. I think Ms. Griffin, in reading her notes, said 3,800, but that is a 5,000 square foot retail component located there on the northern building. Just to orient you, there's the Movie Tavern, here's La Yaca, there's a Plaza Azteca, the brewery, and a Ticha located here closer to Richmond Road along with the bank. And because parking is a key part of the discussion today, members of the commission, I want to highlight the location of the parking garage here. We'll talk about that further. And I would also point out to the commission that this is an urban design of a mixed-use shopping area. And so the parking is not all clustered around the doorway of the businesses or restaurants. Many of the parking fields, like the parking garage, are somewhat remote from the actual businesses, as is typical in a more urban design. You've seen these, what I would characterize as attractive elevations of the project, and as I click through them again, I'll mention to you that our fiscal impact analysis submitted to the city shows that because these will only be 1 or 2 bedroom apartments, they're likely to generate only about 10 school children, and will have a net positive fiscal impact after costs to the city of about $6 million over the next 20 years when compared to those open grassy fields which generate no real material economic benefit. As Ms. Griffin pointed out, the traffic study shows that the residential project will bring those shoppers and diners to High Street, but without the same traffic volume turning off of Richmond Road, so the turning movements and traffic flow in the area of High Street will be much better. And these architectural elevations are important for another reason, and that is the architect for the project is Pool & Pool. Michael Poole did the High Street View design, which you've now seen and is very attractive. The style and the character of these buildings is very much in keeping with what's already built at High Street, but importantly, so is the density. This is consistent with the density to the west behind the Movie Tavern. And this is, again, an urban design. This is the place in the city where density should be located. This is not trying to put this level of density in a residential neighborhood. The ARB had a preliminary look at these elevations and was very positive. They did make some comments, and we quickly incorporated all of those comments into the conceptuals that you see here. Show you some of the architecture of the existing commercial uses, just by way of demonstrating that these are derivations of colonial style and that the Crescent Novel project fits in well with that architectural style. And these are some interiors just to give you a feel for the project. These come from my clients' projects in Arizona, North Carolina, Tennessee, and Georgia. They suggest, again, a high-end tenant. Rents for the project would be aimed at military, grad students, faculty, but not undergraduates. Go back for just a minute, talk about the parking piece. That's a little obtuse, but I'll make this easy for you. We now agree on the parking numbers. We agree as to what spaces are in place now, what would be required under the current constructed commercial space, and the staff and the applicant agree that our project would create a shortage of 40 parking spaces, about 4% of the total parking in all of High Street. So our SUP request is for the variance or permission to build with that shortage of 40 spaces. And the rationale is shared parking. From an engineering perspective, Mr. Stevenson will tell you shared parking works. It works in Williamsburg. It's working in Newtown. It's working down in Colonial Williamsburg, where the parking garage is used on the same basis. The general principle is the residents are gone during the day when the businesses need parking, and the businesses are closed at night when the residents come home and park overnight. Now, anecdotally, we've talked to our neighbors. Mr. Wright has been around to the businesses, talked to Lamar, talked to the Movie Tavern. And we've heard anecdotally stories of restaurant patrons having to circle the block to find a spot to park. About the Taylor Swift movie premiere, filled up the whole parking lot. But this is an urban design where there aren't a lot of parking spaces right at the door. And I would suggest to the commission that, in fact, it's unrealistic to think that people can drive up to the front door of a restaurant and find a parking spot where the parking fields are somewhat remote from the businesses. Anecdotally, the parking garage stays empty. We sent Mr. Stevenson over there on Friday night, the 13th of October, about 7 o'clock. We've got a picture or two. I won't make you look at them unless you're interested. Very, very empty parking lot on a busy fall Williamsburg weekend in that peak hour for businesses and restaurants. So we suggest that the shared parking will work nicely and justifies a variance on those few 40 parking spaces that might be a shortage. And would also suggest to you that should the residential development be denied, and should by chance commercial users come along, we don't think that'll happen, but if it did, there'd be even more demand for parking than there would be with the residential use, and you get the increased traffic as well. I'll close, Mr. Chairman, by talking about the affordable housing proffer, which we're very excited about on this project. Originally, the application called for affordable units in the mix on site at this project. And as we talked to staff and others in city leadership, the innovative idea of this $7,775 per unit cash proffer paid into a fund that would be operated and allocated by the city seemed attractive to all parties. Remember that the comprehensive plan goal for the economic development land use district says, I'm quoting this, the district should encourage adequate housing opportunities. This addresses a need in the community in a material way, as well as propping up the High Street Center. So in conclusion, Mr. Chairman, thank you for your indulgence this afternoon. Revolution Golf, the Movie Tavern, some of our neighbors support this project. Shopping Center needs you to interpret the comprehensive plan and evolve a little bit with the original plans for this development. I'd respectfully request that the Commission recommend approval of the new ED3 ordinance, recommend approval of rezoning of our site to ED3, and then grant the special use permits that are needed to add 3.3% more residential density and sharing of parking to allow us to be under by just 40 spaces. And I'd be happy to answer questions the commission may have.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Davis. Ms. Liebel, do you have questions for Mr. Davis?
No, I do not. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Questions for Mr. Davis? I believe Mr.
I'll
Hamilton's
start.
question is still on the board.
I think I saw the answer to my question in your brief. Is there a single owner for all of High Street right now?
There is for this commercial section, yes, sir,
Okay.
Mr. Hamilton.
So the developer is acting on behalf of the owner here, and from the context of parking, everybody's got an equal opportunity to use the parking that's available on the site.
Pretty much. The owner, Lamar, controls the parking. There's a declaration of covenants in place, if you want to get down into the legal granularity. And so Lamar has the ability to say, yes, Crescent, you can, if your application is approved, develop the residential and use our streets and use our parking.
Okay.
Mr. Granger? No questions. Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
We'll now move on to public input. We don't have any speaker cards, but I think we have a fairly, and I know Dr. Cranbuell is chomping at the bit to address us. So, floor is yours, sir. I think Heather was going to run the 5-minute timer there. So,
All right, Mr. Boswell, thank you. Thank you all for serving on this very challenging responsibility. Well, first of all, I'm quite excited about this project. I spent a fair amount of time working in Europe with international oil companies, and this High Street really excites me about what they're doing in Paris, where they have high density, high buildings in certain areas, and this is a perfect area for that. So it's in one sense quite visionary for Williamsburg, and I like it. I just have two significant concerns. If we think about Williamsburg, we like green space and we worry about traffic, aside from the parking issue, which is quite complicated, but this is an ideal place. There's no green space missing, and the traffic is stoplights and all that is fine. But we also are interested in maintaining our commercial areas, and we all understand the current environment, which they allude to, and it's very difficult. But that doesn't mean it's going to be that way forever, and it doesn't mean that rental units are going to be what's the demand as interest rates go down. So we really need a plan for 30, 40, or 50 years. I feel rather strongly that the first floor of Building 1, I guess I've got it right, where there is the one quite nice idea of a two-story commercial place. There are a lot of two-story commercial buildings in San Francisco when it was alive and well. And I'd like to see the whole first floor reserved for some sort of retail or offices, and even have the other end have a two-story. I think that'd be exciting. I don't like the idea of our retail space being taken over by the college and for other uses. So I'd strongly urge that that space remain retail, offices, or whatever. But then we come to the major point, and that is affordable housing. So we had a wonderful example set by Colonial Williamsburg. They were building 166 units, and they were ready to fund 17 affordable houses at about $350,000. That's just short of $6 million for a project with 162 units. What we have before us is a variety of proposals, from practically nothing to a rather small, what I consider a very low ball amount. So 1.5 million doesn't even get close to 6 million when you have even more units. I really think they need a triple that. And the other example, which we need to use, as my opinion, as a standard, are the 21 units out of 162 units that are already approved and being built across the railroad tracks very near here. So Cliff Fleet and the Spotswood and the folks who are building this Village Green, I guess if that's what it's called, have been quite positive in reducing their profit somewhat, because Spotswood was designed to generate revenue for Colonial Williamsburg, 100% solid revenue. And so is this project across the street here, they're a block away. And those are significant contributions. And so I would strongly urge that you set a standard that we match those two standards, one way or the other, where you have 6, 7, 8, 9% of units that are designed for lower income, or you match something close to $6 million on 162 units, which would be 3 to 4 times what they're contributing. And I believe they can totally afford it. So that's part of being part of our community. And of course, everybody comes in with an offer, but we need to really seriously challenge it and encourage them to step up to the plate and provide adequate funding for what we need, which I'm quite sure they can afford. So visionary, great, the right place, lots of problems solved. I agree, parking, I didn't bother to try to figure it out. You gentlemen are doing an excellent job. But other than that, the main thing is I'd like to see retail on the first floor of Building 1, and I definitely will strongly require or urge everyone, you and City Council and anybody who has to prove this, to have them step up to something on the order of what Cliff Fleet and Colonial Williamsburg did, or provide housing for lower income to the tune of something close to 20-plus units for 160, 150. So that's it. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for being here. Yes, sir. Please, and if you state your name and address for the clerk.
My name is Vittorio Minichiello, and address 1242 Richmond Road. And my company owns the building in the front, which is the brewery, to give an example, and another piece of the property attached to the learning center, 7,500 square feet. Okay? The project look good, it's beautiful. I respect all the people involved, but they're wonderful people. But the project cannot work. The density is too high. You're gonna take over the parking completely, because one thing again we need to understand why I am against is because Lamar, they promised them they're gonna sign all the parking, 220 parking space or 250 parking space just for the residential, not a mixed use. Not everybody can park everywhere they find the parking. They want to assign parking to the residential. That's the only way the project is going to go. And what about the other people? What about the commercial people? So the commercial people can go to the parking garage to pick up a sandwich or Subway, and the residential park right in the front. And when they park at night, most of the time, the residential come home at 5, 5:30, 6, not at 10, 11. The parking, I'm against, the park requirement should be for shared parking, not approve the 40 parking space, because we already have no parking. I had a tenant for building attached to the learning space, 7,500 square feet, and they walk away. They walk away because parking. Okay, I know I can provide the name, everything. So for me, the parking is an issue. The way they want to cut the parking, Lamar is saying this in declaration, they can give a parking, assigned parking. Yes, it's in the declaration, but they have a 3 challenge in the state of Virginia court. They lost the case in court because you cannot assign parking, and that already by the building. I'm a part of the HOA, the homeowner. You cannot assign my parking to somebody else. You don't own that anymore when you sell your property. It's not the sole owner. Lamar is not the owner by itself right now. My company owner, the big piece on the front, Daniela Layaca owns Layaca, and then you have other owners, they own Plaza Tega. You need to protect the little bit of commercial is there. The density is too high. Cut the floor in each one, and they will be beautiful. Make it smaller. You cannot put a 5-pound bucket of water and 3.5-pound bucket of water, okay? I think the project, it can be work, it's a beautiful idea, but the density is too high. You take over all the parking, what good, it's gonna provide a little more traffic, but what kind of good it's gonna do to us when the people can have no parking? And that thing that bothered me the most, can they want to give assigned parking? Nobody's talking about that. They talk about shared parking, It's share nothing. It's assigned parking to the project. I don't like that. The city, I'm expecting to protect my investment. I invest a lot of money there, and I wanted the city to protect. I bought the property with the parking requirement the way it was. I don't want to change that. And I don't want nobody to change that because I need to protect my investment. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for being here. Yes, sir. If you would, sir, state your name and address for the clerk.
My name is Daniel Abid. I'm the chef and owner of Loyaka French Restaurant. And the same thing, I have nothing against the project, nothing about anybody here, but we're really concerned about the parking. My clientele is older people. I mean, we've been here for 40 years in business, since 1980, and a lot of people are not going to walk half a mile to go to eat. So it is. And this is my real concern. So I want to make sure it's adequate parking for the customer. So that's why I'm here to speak about it. As far as the parking downstairs right now, we can't even use it because the elevator doesn't even work. So, I mean, it's another issue, but the elevator, it doesn't even work. So people are not going to go downstairs for now until it's fixed and run it properly. But like Victor, I invested all my life, last 30 years, Loyaka here financially, so it is important to me also. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else from that side? Are you get together? Anyone else like to speak? Mr. Maslin in the back row? Nothing? Okay. I believe that's everyone. Anyone else? Okay. I'm going to close the open forum at that point and ask for commissioner comments. Ms. Liebel?
Yeah, I have two comments. First, of course, we're talking about parking, and I have all that the parking ratios that we use in calculating how many parking spaces should be allowed for multifamily units is a little low given the fact that we are a car-driven society. So having a 40-space deficit in the calculation, if you're assuming X number of one-bedroom units and X number of two-bedroom units, it's probably, in my mind, it's a larger deficit than 40. The other thing that I'm concerned about is the staff comment about creating a new zoning a zoning area called ED3 that anyone then could apply to rezone to ED3, and we might be having these same conversations about density in places that formerly had not been as dense as this is going to allow. And so those are just my two comments.
Thank you, Ms. Liebel. Mr. Hamilton?
I concur with Ms. Liebold. The zoning example, we're kind of just, it's showing up and we're going to make an immediate decision to create a new zoning district rather quickly compared to how we might usually go about doing these things. As far as the parking goes, I think it's very critical to get the parking right in the beginning, because once you're locked into it, and if you get it wrong, there isn't any way to fix it anymore. I would note also that Midtown Row is using reserved parking spaces, and I've got some experience there where I think they're having challenges with coming up with enough spaces for all their tenants to park in. So just got to be careful with issues like that and get it right in the beginning. I don't know that there's any other place to go for the parking if you don't have enough on site. You got to have it where people are going to want to use it.
Thank you. Mr. Cahill, comments?
Yeah, a couple comments. I think residential is the highest and best use here, and I tend to agree with the applicant that the commercial side of things, it's been there vacant for 13 years. I don't see that changing much. And also, I think that it's a credible applicant with a solid track record and produced good elevations in the multifamily business, so they'd be theoretically an asset to the city. But, and then it is only that 3% increase, but what gives me the heartburn the most is changing the zoning code that drastically, from 14 units an acre to, I guess, 105. That just seems like a drastic change, like Mr. Hamilton said, to make just in one meeting. But I still think residential is the highest and best use there. So those are just my thoughts.
Thank you. Charlie, would you like to? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Were you?
Oh, and then one other thing, just a comment. I applaud the developer for offering a proffer, because that's not required. And I think we sometimes expect developers to go above and beyond what's required, and now we're even in certain cases expect them to go above and beyond what they offered. So I just think that that should be noted.
Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate all the effort that went into putting this proposal together. It's a lot of resources, a lot of time, a lot of effort. Also, there's a lot of moving parts, which of course makes a proposal like this a kind of a heavy lift to get over the finish line. And I agree with Mr. Davis. I've made that argument on that side of the podium too, that the comprehensive plan to me is a guideline that may be reviewed and may be modified in the intervening years, but on certain conditions. We faced one a few weeks ago. But this isn't one, in my opinion, at this time. I have to assume, by looking at the dates of some of these submissions, that these discussions began in the beginning stages probably barely a year after the comprehensive plan was adopted in September of 2021. It substantially changes the High Street plan. And I remember when the Walmart was going to go there, before it was called the Roseland property, it was Torsion property. So this thing has gone through a lot of different iterations throughout the years. And, this owner, not the developer, the owner bought with full understanding of what was there. And if the idea was, and I think reasonable people can disagree, whether commercial or residential is the highest and best use, but that's what it is right now. It's commercial. And in the last 30 years, the amount of commercial in this town has grown greatly. That area in High Street, I believe, is fully occupied at this point. Maybe not with what was identified at the beginning, but most of those places are occupied. And so, to me, if we adopt this zoning, we throw away the commercial element in those two parcels forever. And I don't think, without the careful deliberations, and I think Ms. Griffin said it to be studied comprehensively, and I assume that means under the comprehensive plan discussions, as to whether a proposal like this does fit in and should be our process going forward. And so, to me, that's the biggest thing. Parking, always going to be an issue. Traffic, I don't know that necessarily less traffic is good for a commercial area. You want people coming to High Street, so I don't know necessarily that that's a positive. And the density, I agree, it's a 3% increase on the overall parcel, but at 100, having something on our books that we discuss at one meeting, that we go to 105 units per acre seems to be extraordinary stretch. So those are my comments.
Thank you, Mr. Charlie. Mr. Granger.
I have nothing to add.
Okay, I will say that I concur with the majority of the comments. My guiding principle is, will this make Williamsburg a better place? And I always look to the comprehensive plan. I see it as a little more stronger than just a guide. But what it does is it ensures predictability, and a couple of the speakers have made that point. They made investments based on the current zoning, and we had some email comments too from the residential folks, from some of the folks that have the residential on the other side of is it Middle Street, right? And they said, we've invested substantial sums of money based on the understanding that we have this side as residential and we're maxed out and everything else is going to be commercial. So I think that predictability is a critical part of the comprehensive plan. And I agree that with several of the comments that we need to take a very close look and a very comprehensive look at a major step like this. Creating a new zoning district or category is not something that we should be doing just at a meeting because a developer, and no criticism of the developer or the owner or anything. This is very creative, but I think it's a little too much. And one of the speakers, I was kind of thinking the 10 pounds of rice in a 5-pound sack. This is a little more than we should be doing at one of these meetings. I do have some concerns also with the parking, particularly about the memorandum from AES about the former sort of principle that everybody goes to work in the morning and comes home in the afternoon. Well, so many people are not working that way anymore. I wonder how that's going to change and impact the residential mix there. So those are my main concerns. Any other comments? Okay, as I said, we're going to do each of these individually. So I'm going to ask, is there a motion to recommend denial of PCR 23-003?
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Kale?
Aye.
Mr. Tarley?
Aye.
Mr. Boswell?
Aye.
Mr. Granger?
Abstain.
Ms. Liebel?
Aye.
Mr. Phillips?
Abstain.
Okay, is there a motion to recommend denial of PCR 23-003A?
So moved.
Mr. Chair, with proffers.
With proffers, okay. To deny it with proffers, okay.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Kale?
Aye.
Mr. Tarley?
Aye.
Mr. Boswell?
Aye.
Mr. Granger?
Abstain.
Ms. Liebel?
Aye.
Mr. Phillips?
Abstain.
Okay, is there a motion to recommend a denial of PCR 23-004?
Guess I'm going to do them all.
Might as well do them all, yeah.
So moved.
I moved already.
Oh, second.
Mr. Hamilton?
Please clarify the motion one more time.
To deny PCR 23-004.
Aye.
Mr. Kale?
Aye.
Mr. Tarley?
Aye.
Mr. Boswell?
Aye.
Mr. Granger?
Abstain.
Ms. Liebel?
Aye.
Mr. Phillips?
Abstain.
Okay, and then is there a motion to recommend denial of PCR 23-005?
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Kale?
Aye.
Mr. Tarley?
Aye.
Mr. Boswell?
Aye.
Mr. Granger?
Abstain.
Ms. Liebel?
Aye.
Mr. Phillips?
Abstain.
Okay, thank you. That completes those four, and that brings us to PCR 23-015 and special use permit 23-007. Ms. Griffin, I believe there will be less math here. Is that correct?
Yes, substantially less math. This is for PCR 23015. It's a request of WADA for a special use permit. You've probably seen this, I think, at least twice in the past few years. It's at 7239 Pocahontas Trail. The reason why this is back before you today is because our zoning ordinance requires a approved site plan with any special use permit within a year. They were not able to provide us with a site plan that could be approved within a year, so therefore this is back before you. So I won't labor long since you know all about this. The property size is around 13.3 acres. The land use designation is public and semi-public, and the zoning is limited industrial. This is the site plan here. They are going to be operating and expanding the public transportation and maintenance facility. The expansion is going to include areas for administration, operations, and maintenance. They're pretty much going to make the site more efficient and more beautification. So there's some landscaping that's going to take place, an addition of a shed to the left here. And this area here is going to have a shed for storage, some designated parking and overflow. Because they are taking on new buses, they are going to have a separate drive space for buses and cars, and right now all of that is together. Anytime we're looking at a special use permit, there are 6 different criteria that we need to make sure that is compatible and in harmony with. The first is a comprehensive plan. The second is the intent of the zoning district. And the third is the character of adjacent properties, the neighborhood, and existing and proposed development. We believe that this particular special use permit is compatible with the comprehensive plan. As the land use designation map shows here, the property is designated as public and semi-public. This is a semi-public operation. It's actually in the comp plan, and it does show that this is supposed to be taking place, that this operation will, this maintenance yard will be improved within the next 10 years. And so they are in line with the comprehensive plan. The next is the intent of the zoning district and the compatibility with the neighborhood. The zoning district is industrial, and you see around it you have the ED2. This is the economic district for Quarter Path, and you also have the museum support. And of course, the intent of this particular district is to encourage light intensity industry, and we believe that it is compatible with the zoning district. The last 3 criteria that we must look at is it adequately serviced by essential public services? Is it going to result in any destruction or loss or damage to ecological and historic sites? And then is a site being designed, sited, and landscaped as not to hinder or discourage other development? So the actual disturbance will only take place on about 2.3 acres. And as I said before, the entire site is 13 acres. It already is serviced by essential public services. There's going to be no additional services there. There are going to be some moving of some water lines. It's not going to result in any destruction or loss or damage. There is a Civil War area adjacent that is not going to be moved. We had that question come up in the site plan review process by Mr. Granger, and there's nothing that's going to be moved. Any site elements will not, you'll still be able to see. There's not going to be any danger to those particular sites. And then, is it landscaped? Is it designed and sited properly? It is. The site plan has already been approved by staff and has been recommended to come forward to the Planning Commission by the Site Plan Review Committee, and that meeting took place in November of this year. Here again is the site plan review. The site plan review committee met November 13th and recommended approval to come before you. And so based on this, staff recommends approval of the special use permit based on the analysis of the 6 criteria, and staff also recommends approval of the site plan. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer it. And I'm surprised I don't see the applicant in the audience, so I'm not sure why they're not here, but hopefully I'll be able to answer any questions that you have.
I think the applicant was here the last 2 or 3 or 4 times we've looked at this. Ms. Liebel, any questions for Ms. Griffin? I see talking on the screen, but I don't hear anything, so maybe that was a no. Any questions for Ms. Griffin? Okay, I'm going to open the public forum. Dr. Cranbuhl, any comments on this one? Thumbs up? Okay, all right, thank you. I'm going to close the public forum. Any comments from anyone? Is there a motion to recommend approval of PCR 23-015 and SPR 23-007?
I so move recommendation of PCR 23-015 and SPR 23-007.
Thank you.
I'll second that motion.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Kale?
Aye.
Mr. Tarley?
Aye.
Mr. Boswell?
Aye.
Mr. Granger?
Aye.
Ms. Liebel?
Aye.
Mr. Phillips?
Abstain.
Okay, thank you. That gets us through our agenda for the day. I'm going to skip over we'll defer the commissioner reports until next time. We do not have a hearing in January, a regularly scheduled hearing, 3:30 Wednesday, but we do have our annual work session on January 24 at 4, where the powers that be will present us with information about the CIP. Any other comments, questions? And we